Welcome to the virtual meeting of the Development Control Committee. It's 6:05 p.m. on Thursday, the 27th of August 2020. My apologies for the delay in starting. This is due to technical difficulties. My name is Councillor Lee Bentley, and I am the chair of this committee, and my fellow councillor, Councillor Linda Broadley, is the vice chair. In accordance with the regulations made under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this remote meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The audio-visual recording will be made available on the Council's website and YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. All meeting participants are reminded to speak slowly and clearly in the direction of their device's microphone at all times. A reminder that mobile phones and other electronic devices should be turned off or put on silent mode, and those participating in the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. For the purpose of recording of attendance, I can confirm that the following councillors are present and participating in this remote meeting. Myself, Lee Bentley, the Vice Chair, Linda Broadley, Jeffrey Kaufman, Samia Hack, Priti Joshi, Amandeep Kaur, Claire Kozłowski, Ellen Lloydell, Richard Morris, and Ian Ridley. We also have the following officers in attendance: Samuel Ball, trainee solicitor, who is acting on as the Democratic Officers Services; David Gill, the head of Law and Democracy and Monitoring; Richard Redford, the Development Control Manager; Judith Sweeney, the Democratic and Electoral Services Officer, who is shadowing; and Steve Tucker, the Democratic and Electoral Services Manager. And finally, we also have the following registered public speaker in attendance, Mr. Rupinder Mann, who will be speaking shortly. For the purposes of the regulations, I can confirm that before this remote meeting went live, all participants confirmed that they can see and or hear all other participants. This is except for Councillor Bill Bolter. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Council's adopted remote meeting procedure rules, a summary of which is attached to tonight's agenda for reference. May I also politely remind all participants that they must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the Council's proper conduct of its business. Thank you. Unfortunately, I am going to have to close the meeting for a short while whilst we get Councillor Bill Bolter in attendance. We will reopen the meeting as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. For the benefit of members of the public watching, the live stream will now be suspended and will be recommenced once Councillor Bolter has. Thank you, Chair. The live stream has now recommenced.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's 8:14. We will recommence the meeting. Okay, apologies for absence.
Just one apology, Chair, from Councillor Frank Broadley.
Thank you. Any appointments of substitutes?
No substitutes, Chair.
Any declarations of interest?
See no hands raised, Chair.
Okay. Could I just check, Mr. Ball, that I can see on my iPad that the recording is still paused? It says record pause live on custom live streaming service. Can you confirm that we are live?
Yeah, we are. The live stream has recommenced, and I've restarted the internal recording.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. May I sign? Okay, I'll take that. Okay, thank you. Right, moving on. Reports of the Development Control Manager. We are taking the second application first, which is application number 20/00228 FUL 2 Eastway Road, Wigston. We have one speaker, Mr. Mann.
Hello, Mr. Mann. Can you see and hear okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mann, you have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a nod when you've got 1 minute left. Okay.
Okay, great. Okay.
Carry on.
Yep. Sorry, my name's Gobinder Mann. I'm the applicant for number 2 Eastway Road. So I just wanted to sort of explain what we've sort of gone through in terms of putting the planning application in and why we've done it. So basically, we've been looking for the last 2 to 3 years for a family home, because at the moment, me and my wife, we're living with our parents sort of in the Leicester City area, and we've got our daughter. She's just starting secondary school. So we wanted somewhere where we can actually turn it into a family home. So a bit of space on the side or at the back, and probably extend. So there's space for maybe me to work from home and also for my daughter to study, because at the moment, because we're living with our parents, it's a bit of a struggle when I've got to work from home because I'm on the downstairs dining room table and there's a lot of commotion going on at home. So basically, we bought this house in December, January time. And then we've gone in for planning permission for the side extension, single story at the back, and then we've got the 2 stories on the side. And obviously we've hit some hurdles with our neighbours in terms of, over size and bulking and massing. And so we've liaised with the planning department and we've amended the plan. So we've actually reduced the first floor by about 4 meters in length. We've also set back the downstairs, the ground floor by 1 meter, because I think there were some issues with regards to traffic turning on the corner, because we're on a corner plot, you see. But which I don't think there's a major issue, because there's a well-established, at least a 2 meter hedge there that's been there for a while. So I'm not sure where these visibility issues have come from. But again, all I wanted to say is that, we've amended our plans from initial concept to what they are now, in accordance with advice got from the planning department. And I just hope everything's okay. And also, I think there were some issues with the regards to some sort of groundwater issues. My background, I'm a geotechnical engineer, so I work on development sites for new housing, roads, bridges. I've been doing it for the last 20 years. And one of the things I do with all properties I'm interested in is I'll actually look at the geology of the site beforehand. And the site that we've bought, number 2 Eastway Road, is glacial till underlain by mudstone. So the likelihood of any sort of shallow groundwater issues is going to be minimal on there because it's relatively impermeable clays. So obviously I've done my sort of background. So I want to just say that, we just want to make a family home for me, my wife, my daughter, and any future kids we have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mann. Mr. Redford, would you like to give your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sam, can we bring up the PowerPoint, please?
Yeah, it should be loading on your screen now.
Thank you, Sam. So if you could move to the next slide. So that's 13, right. So members, this is the existing layout of the site. The left-hand element, there's the ground floor, the gardens. The right-hand side is the first floor. So it's currently a 3-bed semi located on the corner plot. There's parking to the side and the detached garage, which would be removed, demolished as part of the proposal. If you move to the next slide, please, Sam. This is the proposal. These show the amended plans that have been provided. So on the left-hand side, we've still got the ground floor and the parking. So you can see that in terms of parking, there are 2 spaces to the front. The extension to the side is the beigey colour at the front and the light turquoisey blue immediately behind it. That they run from 1 metre back from the front wall to in line with the existing 2-storey rear, with the element at the back of that being the ground floor element. If you look to the right-hand side of that drawing, you've got the 3rd bedroom at first floor level, with what was the 3rd bedroom becoming a study. The original plans submitted showed the first floor element extending right back to beyond the two roof lights that you can see on that drawing. So you can see that not only has it been set back a metre at first floor level, the depth has been reduced from the back to minimise the bulk. So if you move to the next slide, please, Sam. These are the proposed elevations. So top left is what you will see standing right in front of the house. Bottom left is what will be visible from the rear, as well as from part of Eastway Road itself, due to the site's conlocation. The top right is what will be visible from the attached neighbour, whilst the bottom right is the element of what will be visible from the actual road section of Eastway Road to the side of the site. Now, if we can move to the next slide, please, Sam. If you look at the bottom left and bottom right elements of this slide, members will be able to see how the road swings around from the side to the front of the site. So as you enter Eastway Road and go down towards the left-hand bend, ground level actually falls. So the front of the site is actually slightly lower than the back. And if you move to the next two slides slowly, please, Sam. So that's the front in relation to the attached neighbour at the top, and the bottom left is the house looking back up Eastway Road. So you can see and those are the back. Sorry, next one, Sam. The top photograph there shows the existing rear projection that was submitted and approved under a household prior approval. The extension is going to the right-hand side of that. So the existing garage building will be demolished. The single-storey element will be in line with the rear end of that single-storey rear projection, whilst the first floor element will be slightly this way of the rear wall. So if we can go back to the site location plan, Sam, 2 slides previous. Thank you. So members, the application is for a single and 2-storey side extension. It's a resubmission of a previously refused application. And as I've already mentioned, through the consideration of the application, we have had amended plans so that the proposal you are considering is that as shown on the drawings that you have seen. The site is located on Eastway Road at the corner of a bend. It's occupied by a 2-storey semi-detached, surrounded by semi-detached properties. The application is before you at the request of Councillor Frank Broadley, with regards to appearing to be an overdevelopment of the plot out of keeping with the street scene. I would like to note that those comments were in relation to the initially submitted plans, as opposed to those which are in front of you now for consideration. The members will note from the committee report on the bottom of page 21, beginning of page 22, that the County Highway Authority have commented with regards to the access and the parking area of it. The original submitted plans showed the 2 parking spaces side by side directly in front of the main existing house. As proposed in that format, one of the parking spaces would have actually overhung the public footpath, hence why the parking spaces have been changed so that they are both within the site. They both meet the size requirements. So moving on to the representations, and these are as set out in the main agenda. We had 4 letters of objection from 4 separate properties on the original submission, with the reasons for the objection as set out there. Following receipt of the amended plans, we reconsulted with another 3 letters received from those who had previously commented, reiterating their initial objections. Wixon Civic Society did originally put a representation in on the application, but then withdrew it as it wasn't worded correctly and actually related to a different site. The proposal, therefore, moving on to the consideration, the proposal in the amended form, it's got the setback, the reduction of the first floor element to the rear has, in officer's opinion, reduced the scale, the bulk, the massing, the prominence, the overbearing impact in relation to what is a prominent corner site. That reduction of those elements and the resultant design of the roof and everything, as well as the use of matching materials, are such that officers consider the proposal to comply with relevant policy, be in keeping with the existing house and the area, such that the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Redford. Councillor Lloydell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got 1 or 2 concerns about the application. First of all, though, can I say I appreciate that the roof line is being extended with a hipped roof in keeping with the existing roof on the property. It's lovely to see that happening. We're getting too many developments with gable ends that stick out like a sore thumb in the borough. So I'm impressed with that extension there. But a number of concerns I have. First of all, you say, Mr. Redford, that one of the bedrooms has now been turned into a study. However, that study is still a bedroom. We have not got a 3-bedroom property here. We have a 4-bedroom property. And that will have implications on car parking spaces. We can turn all our bedrooms into studies if we like, but they're still bedrooms. And on the plans, it still talks about bedrooms 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's still a 4-bedroom property. That will have implications for car parking spaces. We've already been reduced from 3 to 2 on this property. So where do we stand over that, please? I see highways don't make much of a comment about it, but this is a 4-bedroomed property. My second concern, could we go back on the plans to the one where you show the back of the house, which appears to have an extension which is already, yes, that's it. We seem to have an extension already being built at the back of the house. I didn't see that on the plans upstairs, but I did have concerns that this was breaking the 45-degree rule for the next door neighbour by a considerable amount. Now, is that extension going to be demolished or is that going to stay? Because it does, according to the plan, break a 45-degree rule. So could you please answer those questions for me? Thank you.
Mr. Redford.
Thank you, Chair. To deal with them in order, Councillor Lloydell, with regards to the parking situation, the amended plans proposed do show 2 spaces. However, whilst there isn't room at the front to provide space, the space, should members consider it appropriate, we could attach a condition requiring a further plan be provided to show a 3rd parking space, which could be located in the rear garden, for argument's sake, or to the side of the proposed extension, that would ensure the 3 parking spaces are provided. So I consider that could be dealt with by way of a pre-commencement condition. In respect of the second point in regards to the rear extension. Could we go back to that photograph, please, Sam? Thank you. The extension you see in the top photograph there, obviously that's the extension that was approved under a prior approval. That will be staying. Now, whilst it does reach the 45-degree line, as you rightly point out, Councillor, because that extension was submitted as a prior approval, it was considered and determined under those prior approval provisions. Now, at the time of that submission and consideration, full neighbour notification was undertaken, as is the case. No comments, no objections were received. Had any have been received, we would have been able to take the 45-degree line into account, and we would have probably not been supportive of it. However, unfortunately, because no comments were received, we were bound within the realms of the legislation that says we couldn't consider our normal policies. Does that answer your questions, Councillor?
Councillor Lloyd?
Chair, come back on that, please.
You can, yes.
Did this actual application come to a committee? I don't think it did. Because I certainly, if I had seen that on my planning applications, or I had been the ward councillor for that area, I would have called that application in, because that is a complete breach of the 45-degree rule. And I can well understand the next door neighbours being extremely annoyed about that huge extension across the back going down the boundary, because it fills in the complete back of that garden. And that is just not on. It breaks our 45-degree rule. And whether or not that was called into committee, our planners should have stopped that from going ahead. That should have been a straightforward refusal, in my opinion. So I am not at all pleased that you are saying there are no objections or nobody called it in, because that breaks the 45-degree planning rule straight away. Now we're being asked to approve a double extension to the right of this full length. That makes me very unhappy. I think we should have a condition, Chair, on establishing a third parking space, because looking at the two parking spaces on the front, they've got to be done in slight tandem to one another at the front of the property. And I am quite certain that there is going to be another car parking space required here, and that should go in the back garden, and that should be part of the condition. But I am very, very upset that that previous application has been allowed to go through. That's a fault of planning, in my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. Very much on the lines that Councillor Lloyd has just said. Actually, if you look on if you've got paper copy, page 22, if not, it's under representations. If you go down 6 of the asterisks on it, right down to not including the last 3 on it. I'm trying to do it because it's rather a lot, and to read it all out would take quite a while. But if you go down 6 asterisks, it starts with no room to manoeuvre. And then it goes down to the proposed extension seems oversized. So it's those, they're the representations that I'm talking about. They have not been covered in the new plan at all. It is my ward. I am very, very familiar with this corner property and the road, which obviously county aren't. To have 2 cars on that bend, on that corner, is an accident waiting to happen. There are there has already been numerous accidents on that corner. Certainly in the winter, it's like an ice skating ring going around there. It's a blind corner. So if you're trying to pull out from the car park at the front onto the road to go in either direction, you could quite easily be hit. There is nothing to suggest that it is right in any way, shape, or form. I could understand if the 3 car parking spaces were at the rear of the garden onto but you are talking about a blind corner there. It's just, Mr. Mann actually said he didn't understand it because there was a hedge. But the car parking spaces are going to be on the main Eastway Road, not on the bend, but it is right on the bend. Not acceptable. As I say, it is an accident waiting to happen. I didn't see an application come forward for the existing extension that's there. I would like to know when that happened, because it doesn't even look as though it's completed. So it must have been very recent, which I certainly didn't see. And I do look at the planning applications as they come in on a Monday morning. There isn't a drop curb at the side, so that would have to be applied for. I understand exactly where the neighbours are coming from. It's at the bottom. Eastway Road at the side of this property runs downhill. And again, when you get water, regardless of Mr. Mann's opinion, the water does run like a river down there. Hence, it ices over in the winter. I'm glad to see that the bulk of it is reduced. I don't think it's been reduced enough. I do think it's out of keeping. There is semi-detached and immediately across the road there's a detached house, but there's also a bungalow. It would be, in my opinion, it is still overbearing in the street scene, and I would not be voting for this application.
Okay, Mr. Redford, could you just give an opinion, please, on Councillor Broadley's comments regarding the access? What's the existing access compared to the proposed access? Is there a different entrance?
No, the existing access is that which will be used on the proposal. Bear with me, I'm just going to... Sam, can we bring the first of the photographs up, please? On the top photograph probably shows it better. You can see where the skip is, and that's obviously been dropped through the existing vehicular access point to serve the garage. Directly in front of there is where the existing dropped curb is going to be, existing dropped curb is. That is what will continue to be used on the application. Does that help?
Okay, yes, thank you. So basically, there's no alteration from the existing to the new.
Exactly.
And it's
Can
with
I
the
come
same
back?
width. Yes, yeah, can I just finish? You can come back, Councillor Broadley, but I just want to finish. With regard to the rear extension, I understand members' concerns about that because it is very large and I wouldn't actually like that myself. But it is actually existing. It's got planning permission, so it doesn't really form part of this application. Can we just all keep that in mind? Councillor Broadley, you'd like to come back?
Yes, I would. As I say, I am very familiar with this property. That access is for one car. There's no way that you would get 2 cars in there unless there was one behind the other. You wouldn't fit 2 cars next to each other, given that access. So therefore, the wall has got to be altered, which brings it even closer to the edge of the boundary, the side road. And I am aware that the extension already has planning permission, but I would like to know when it got the planning permission for my own peace of mind. As I say,
Okay.
it is basically the parking and the of this property that I am objecting to. I
Okay.
can't object to the big extension, but I do object to the parking because it is so unsafe.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadley. Mr. Redford, just for information, when did the prior approval for the existing extension be approved?
Right, the prior approval submission was received on the 12th of December last year, was valid on the 16th. The neighbours were consulted on the 18th of December with their publicity period expiring on the 10th. Now, please bear in mind that in terms of neighbour publicity, the planning legislation has been altered beginning of last year, so that where there are public holidays, such as Christmas, the days that would be lost by those are actually added to the end. So that was covered there. The decision itself was issued on the 20th of January.
Okay,
The weekly, it appeared on the 23rd of December weekly list as well, for reference.
okay, thank you. Councillor Ridley?
Thank you, Chair. My question is also about the parking and the fact that the earlier, the unamended application mentioned possibility that it was going to overlap the pathway. Now, when I looked at the presentation, officer presentation, I just assumed because of the tight fitting of the spaces that the front wall would have to be demolished. If so, and it does take parking right up to the boundary, then how is the legislation or the planning application, how is it enforced to make sure that cars are not overlapping the pavement, because there is no physical separation, if you like, between the public highway, public path and the property?
Mr. Redford?
Thank you, Chair. On that, now that the planning permission, if planning permission is granted, only relates to that within the application site. Anything beyond the application site, regardless of whether that's onto a neighbouring site or the public highway, no planning permission is granted or inferred for that. Now, in the context of this, if the parking was still in the originally submitted format of being side by side with one car physically overhanging the footpath, whilst permission could theoretically have been granted for that, any overhanging or impediment of the footpath or overhang on someone else's site does not negate the need for the applicant to get the permission of the landowner, which in this case would be the county highways. So any enforcement of that overhanging, should that occur, would be through the county highways.
Or the police, Councillor Ridley, if it's causing an obstruction on the public highway.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no more hands raised. So,
Councillor Lloydell with her hand raised, Chair.
Councillor Lloydell, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. I do appreciate that. I'd like to know from Mr. Redford, was that prior application done then under delegated? And if so, why has a planning officer not picked up such a gross breach of a 45-degree rule with that? And secondly, Chair, we've been placed in a very difficult position over this application, because had this application come forward complete with that prior application as well, this would be a sheer overdevelopment of the site, and we would certainly be looking at a refusal of this application. Because it's been done, in my opinion, piecemeal, we now are in a difficult position, because the application we've got before us, apart from the parking issue, which needs to be covered with a condition, we can have no grounds to refuse it. But had it come complete with that extension in the back garden as well, we would be looking at certainly refusing this application. It's pure overdevelopment of the site. And I am very concerned that that first application has gone through without 45-degree angle being brought in and it being reduced in size. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Mr. Redford, there was a question there regarding the 45-degree rule. I know it's regarding the existing extension, but I think it is well worth explaining again.
Yeah. To answer the first element of the question, it was a delegated decision. Now, with regards to the picking up of the 45-degree line, the application, as members will be aware, the planning applications you'll deal with have a suffix at the end, which delineates or gives an indication as to what type of submission they are. Now, the submission for that rear projection has the suffix HPA, which stands for Household Prior Approval, which means that we assess it against the provisions of the General Permitted Development Order. Now, the order says that in the case of this property as a semi-detached dwelling, any extensions between 3 metres deep and 6 metres deep, they've got to submit the drawings to us, tell us the sizes, how deep, wide, high, to eaves and ridge. We've got to do publicity, but we can only apply our adopted policies, which would include the 45-degree line. We can only apply those where we receive a letter of representation on the submission. If we don't have a submission letter of representation received, we cannot take our adopted policies into account. So it's not a case that the breach of the 45-degree line was not picked up by the officer. It's merely the fact that because no objections or representations were received, our hands were tied. We couldn't physically and legitimately take that policy into account. Had we received a representation, there's a very high likelihood that we would have said, adopted policies apply now because we've had an objection, and in which case it would have pretty much certainly been recommended for refusal by virtue of impact on the neighbour by breaching that 45-degree line. As we didn't get anything, our hands were bound, I'm afraid. I know it's not nice. I know it's frustrating. Unfortunately, that's the position we find ourselves in as the officers by virtue of the legislation that we have to operate within.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Redford. Thank you. Councillor Lloyd, you'd just like to come quickly back on that?
I will come quickly back. Sorry, that is, in other words, a complete cop-out, in my opinion. If we have something that is grossly wrong with a planning application, but for some reason the ward councillor or someone doesn't put in a letter of representation, that means that our officers can do nothing about it and they're going to permit it. So my advice now is to all councillors, every application, put in a straightforward letter of representation and it covers the background for everything, because this application should not have gone through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Councillor Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question regarding, I know there's been a lot of talk about the letter of representation wasn't made on the first application. Can I just ask for clarification? Was that application advertised to resident, or was it just to the councillors? How would people pick up on it that the representation needs to be made if it wasn't advertised?
Mr. Redford, I believe it was advertised, wasn't it?
It was, yes, Chair. Neighbour letters were sent out, and there were, it was obviously, neighbour letters were sent out, and the matter was obviously on the weekly list.
You had a site notice as well, Mr. Redford?
Unfortunately not, because due to the nature of the submission, our scheme of working for site notices is such that for prior approvals, with the exception of telecoms prior approvals, they don't get put up on this by virtue of what the regulations say, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So there was no site notice, but there were neighbour letters sent out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaufman?
Can I just come back, Chair?
Yes, Councillor Hack, yes.
Just a quick question again. So did the letter specify that representation can be made, or was it that this is just for information because it was permitted development?
Mr. Redford?
The letters, the wording of the letters is pretty much set out by the regulations on this one. We draw our attention to where the submitted documents can be viewed and ways in which representations could be made, be that email, via the council's website, or in traditional handwritten posted letters. We don't, and I believe we can't say, if you make recommendations, this will be considered against policy. I don't believe we can do that. Does that provide some clarity, Councillor?
Okay. Is that okay, Councillor Hack? Because we're going way off topic here, we are.
No, sorry, Chair, but I just wanted to, because Councillor Lloydell has made a very valid point. I think for future references, this needs to be noted, and people or councillors need to be made aware that if we want to make representation on permitted development against or for policy to be considered, it can only be done with representation. So that point needs to be raised.
I agree, Councillor Hack.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Chair.
Can we talk about something other than the extension, please?
Well, what I was going to do, I was actually going to move that regretfully we have to approve this application with the amendment of ensuring that there's at least one extra car space put in. I think we agreed that there's no other way that we can go. But what I wanted to add to this is there's a new white paper, planning white paper that comes in that makes our job even more difficult over the years. And I think we're going to have to make some representations to government on this. I'm actually shocked. It's quite obvious that a cleverer architect than us, as people who know the system, can get to do things differently. And I feel very sorry for neighbours. I think it went out on the 23rd of December. And I would assume at the 23rd of December for an application of this sort to go out, people have better things to do than to look out to make sure somebody's going to build something like that next to them. So I regretfully, so I'm going to move the approval with at least one extra car parking space if I can. And look forward to something.
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. I'll second that. We have no more hands, so just to make sure we do this procedurally correct, the application has been moved by Councillor Kaufman. It's been seconded by myself, but we need to add condition for supplying a third parking space to be negotiated by the officers. Can I have...
Chair, can I just say, I said at least one more car parking space.
Yes, that's a third parking space, yes. Yeah.
No, at least one.
You want specifically one more parking space?
A minimum of.
A minimum of, okay. So can I ask for members' approval on adding a condition to this application for the addition of a minimum of one additional parking space as detailed by Councillor Kaufman and seconded by myself? Can I have a show of hands on that, please?
Chair, I have a majority of members, including Councillor Bolter, on that one.
Okay, we'll move on to the vote for the main approval then. It's been recommended for approval moved by Councillor Kaufman, seconded by myself with the additional condition All those in favour of approval?
Chair, I need to take a recorded vote on this one, so I'll
Yes.
call
Carry on, yes.
call out members' names. If you could unmute and mute yourself after you've indicated members. So, Councillor Bentley,
For,
Councillor Bolter,
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley,
Against.
Councillor Hack,
For.
Councillor Joshi,
For.
Councillor Kaufman,
For.
Councillor Kaur,
For.
Councillor Kozlowski,
Against.
Councillor Lloydell,
Against.
Councillor Morris,
For.
and Councillor Ridley.
For.
Thank you.
I make that 8 for, 3 against.
That's correct, Chair. I have the same.
Okay, that application is approved. Thank you. We will now move on. Land adjacent to 2628 Station Road, Wigston. Mr. Redford, would you like to give your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right, so if we can move to the first slide, please, Sam. Right, so this provides the context of the site and the surroundings. So the proposal, you can see there the crossroads of where Pullman Road meets Station Road. The area immediately to the bottom of where it says Station Road is the leisure centre, with the area at the bottom right corner being the school. So it's that big vacant site on the corner of Pullman Road, Station Road that most of us know and drive past. This proposal shows the layout. It shows a backwards C kind of shaped building with a small number of green areas, parking and cycle area. If we move to the next slide, please, Sam. So this shows the ground floor and first floor. So we can see that there are a number of flats, ground floor and first floor. At the left-hand section of that picture, at the very top, there is a commercial unit, and they are proposing to use it for D1 purposes. Immediately to the bottom of that commercial unit, before the first flat, is the proposed access, utilising the existing vehicular drop curb at that point. Now, that vehicular access also serves the parking area for the adjacent building. Members may recall that a year, 2 years back, that application for the change of use from offices to residential came and included parking in that. So that parking area you see there would be to serve both the proposed development and the adjacent flats. So if you move to the next slide, please, Sam. So this shows the upper floor and the roof plan. So there will be some accommodation up there, but there's a need to bear in mind that the units in there are duplex, so they're split over 2 levels. So the rooms you see there are partnered with the flats immediately below them as well. So the next slide, please, Sam. So this shows the view when facing the site stood on Pullman Road itself. So the top is the existing, the bottom is the proposed. So the building on the extreme right-hand side that you can see is where the existing newsagents is. So immediately beside that, at ground floor level, will be the proposed D1 use. The upper floor and the rest of the ground floor to the left of the access as you look there will form the flats. Next slide, please, Sam. This is it looking from, in reality, the school, in front of the school stroke leisure centre. So you can see the existing site with a tree and obviously what's going to propose in there. So you can see that the height of it, ridge height, matches that of the existing property to the left, as well as on the other side of Pullman Road itself, out on Station Road, Pullman Road itself. Next slide, please, Sam. So this is looking at it from the car park for the leisure centre. So you can see the existing tree in the middle there as the tree that will be removed. You can see the existing building on the left, whilst the building straight ahead is the flank wall of that newsagent. The bottom one tries to show it, admittedly poorly, across the width of Pullman Road itself, with the property on the other side of Pullman Road. Next, please, Sam. So this is it looking from Pullman Road itself. So the top slide shows the existing building that was converted last year, year before, into the flats. The bottom one shows it beside in the context of that shop, the newsagents. There. Next one, please, Sam. And that shows it looking straight on at the access. So you can see the existing flats on the left, the flank wall of the newsagents building on your right, plus the houses in the back. So if you could go back up to the first slide, please, Sam, thank you. So the application as we have it is for the erection of a 2 to 2.5 story building to provide 12 residential flats forming one bed studio flat, 4 one-bed duplex flats, 5 one-bed flats, and 2 two-bed flats, as well as a D1 unit with the associated access, parking, cycle store, bins, etc. Since the report was done, there have been no further consultation responses received, nor have there been any further representations. So everything from a consultee and third party perspective is as per the report. As set out in the report, when the application was first submitted, the D1 unit was proposed to be an A1, A2 unit. That was changed to being a D2 on the back of a request for a sequential test by virtue of a D1 use not needing a sequential test, whereas an A1, A2 does. The amended plans that we have that are before you also reflect changes requested by the Highway Authority to address visibility displays at the entrance exit to the site by vehicles. The application site is in the principal urban area, which means that the principle of residential development is acceptable. Same applies to the proposed D1 element of the submission. It also represents, whilst it's being used for parking in association with the previous use of the adjacent building, it does constitute as a brownfield urban infill. So yet again, it complies in principle with those policies. Its location is such that it's between 10 and 20 minutes walk respectively from both South Wigston and Wigston town centres, admittedly a bit closer to South Wigston than Wigston, but it is within what is generally considered an acceptable walking distance to make use of the facilities and services in those locations. Now, as set out in the report, officers are of the opinion that the design and appearance has been orchestrated in a way that has tried to draw in from existing uses, from the existing buildings in the area. It's accepted that comparatively the open space associated with the flats is lower than those of the surrounding and adjacent houses. It's accepted that the majority of the houses in the immediate area are confined to 2 stories and a roof, whereas this is proposing some elements of the accommodation in the roof. You can see from looking at the drawing that's on the screen now, there appears to be a lot going on in there. But officers' view is that on balance, the design and appearance would be acceptable. They've tried to follow the building lines of both Station Road and Pullman Street, appropriate materials to try and ensure it fits in appropriately. Looking at amenities, the internal layouts and windows serving the flats themselves have been orchestrated in a manner to ensure that either there is no overlooking of neighbouring sites, or where there is, it is from a communal hallway as opposed to a main room in one of the flats proposed. Now, this application site and the adjacent site are in the control of the same applicant. So, as is set out in the contribution section on page 14 of the report, by virtue of that link between the two sites, contributions are required for affordable housing and open space. Now, based on the collective number of units between the two sites, in this case, it would have required 2 units, affordable units, to be provided, as well as the financial contribution to open space provision within the area. Now, viability has been put forward, and on the basis of the assessment of that viability, an offer has been made in respect of a financial contribution for the affordable houses, and as well as the financial contribution required for the open space contribution, so that there will be a collective contribution to the value of just under £60,000, based on the figure sum, ignoring any indexation to that amount. As you can see, in respect of parking in highways, the highways are now satisfied on the basis of the amended plans that the visibility in relation to access is acceptable. They have also commented, and I will draw your attention to page 14, the first paragraph in the parking in highways, the third sentence of the first paragraph, that says obviously the Highways Authority, have also commented that the internal arrangements, while remaining private, incorporates adequate parking provision and cycle parking provision in accordance with their adopted standards in a manner that is acceptable, subject to conditions be attached to any approval. So the Highway Authority are satisfied that even though it's going to be a private site and therefore not in their control for the upkeep and maintenance, they are satisfied there is sufficient parking and cycle provision in there on that. Collectively, therefore, councillors, the application has been recommended for approval, subject to conditions, and either a Section 106 agreement or unilateral undertaking in respect of the contributions towards affordable housing and open space provision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Redford. Councillor Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. Does each of these flats meet the national standard for the size? That is the first question. And I know we're not talking about the original, the property next door, which is in the same owner. I thought then that there was a condition for open space, garden space for these flats to be kept at the back, which now looking at this plan are going to be car parking spaces. And yes, I understand that you can amend previous planning things, but there doesn't appear to be any outside space at all for anybody in these flats. And when you think about the amount of flats that are in the existing house, and then we're going to give, if permission's given, there's another 12. That's a lot of people without outside space. When originally, you know, we accepted the other because there was outside space for these people to go. So 2 questions. Should we have outside space for these people, and do they meet the national standard?
Mr. Redford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to answer those questions backwards. I've just brought up the permission for the adjacent unit and looked through the conditions. There is nothing on the conditions requiring amenity space be provided for the 6 that were approved in the adjacent building. There is something with regards to the area to the front of that building, but nothing in respect of open space provision for the rear section of the building. In response to that, with regards to the standards, there's a need to bear in mind that because this is a new build scheme, the space standards as per our local plan don't unfortunately apply to new builds. They apply to conversions, not new build. On that basis, to be totally honest with you, Councillor Broadley, I've not actually done that comparison for the flats, to be honest with you.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, you definitely can. Yes.
So because that you're saying that they don't apply to a new build, we could then really be giving planning permission for rabbit hutches because they're not taken into account. I mean, I thought policy had changed so that this borough was not going to approve anything, whether it be new build, existing, whatever, without it meeting the national standard. Now you're telling me it's different for a new build. And yes, that must be an oversight because the original planning permission for the original building did have open space at the back for those 6 residents. I can remember it quite plainly that it was going to be a garden thing at the back. And that must be our fault that we didn't put it in as a condition for it to remain as a garden. But I'm not happy that you're saying that these flats, or that you haven't done the comparison to see if they do meet national standards. There has been mentioned in here as well about the overlooking of properties. Next to these, the original planning application and this application are 2 or 3, maybe 4, I can't remember, terrace houses. Are you saying that this is far enough away that it won't overshadow their gardens? Because they don't have an awful lot of outside space, and if it's overshadowed and no sun in them, it's not going to be pleasant for them. Thank you.
Mr. Redford.
In terms of the overshadowing, my opinion is that the only adjacent units where there will be an element of overshadowing will be the commercial unit immediately adjacent to the north of the site where that newsagent is. If you look at if we can have a look at the site location again for a second, Sam. So if you look at the top property that's marked number 18, I think it is, right at the top, you can see that, yes, that's the one. You can see the projection just below that goes beyond the rear wall. That would create an element of overshadowing. On its own, I'm not sure I would personally like to try and defend its appeal. Obviously, if members feel that it on its own or as part of other things contribute to a significant impact on the area, then that's something that could feasibly be included as a reason for refusal as a collective entity. Does that help, Councillor Broadley?
Councillor Broadley?
Not really. No, it doesn't. It doesn't help. And I'm still not happy about this national sizing, but
Okay.
you're not going to tell me that it's going to be done before we give planning permission. So
Sorry, I've just got the local plan up on my computer monitor because I'm sat in the office for that. Now, Appendix Ii is the part of the local plan that has the technical housing standards in, and the document that's in there is the actual copy of the DCLG as was technical housing space standards, nationally described space. Now, the wording of that in paragraph 1 itself says this standard deals with internal space within new dwellings and is suitable for applications across all tenures. So on the face of those wording, you could use it for new build. However, my understanding from dialogue with both Adrian as head of service and Jamie as the forward planning manager is that the space standards relate solely to conversions as opposed to new build.
Okay.
sorry, Chair, can I come back on that? So
You
paragraph 1 says it can be used for new builds, but they're both saying that it can't.
Yes.
I think it's a case of interpretation here. I think this is something we need to discuss outside of this committee, because I'm a little bit concerned about this, because there was supposed to be a supplementary planning document that should have weight.
Yes.
Being brought in to correct this, because we know we weren't happy with the original plan. I think we really need to discuss this outside, because this is a problem. Can I carry on now, Councillor Broadley?
Yeah, Chair, I accept what you're saying, that yes, a discussion needs to be had, but that first paragraph, which is, you know, the standards that they're saying can be used for new builds, and if these don't meet that standards, regardless of whatever discussion we have, these don't meet that standards. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Sorry, if I can jump in again, Chair. Policy 11 of the local plan on how it's titled Housing Choices. Having just read through it, the final paragraph of that policy, and I'll read it word to word. It says, all residential proposals for conversions, subdivision and/or changes of use will be determined on a case-by-case basis and must take account of the government's technical housing standards. Nowhere else in that policy can I see anything with regards to the technical housing standards relating to new build dwellings, which would include flats.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lloydell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What a nightmare, Chair.
Yes.
What an absolute nightmare we're facing. Residents being forced into hobbit holes. That's what this is all about. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful that this is going ahead, and that our planners aren't actually, and our forward plans aren't fighting for decent standard houses for residents and future residents in our borough. It's a disgrace. But coming back to this planning application, first of all, we've got number 1, the windows in the existing flats that have already been built, all of those facing towards Pullman Road are primary windows for the flats. What is the distance between those windows and the new build flats, and will it affect their light source as they are primary windows? So that's my first question. Secondly, on the map, there are allocated 11 car parking spaces, which incorporates 12 flats in the new build, and is it 12 flats in the existing? That cannot be enough parking spaces for that area. So I warn now everyone active in the swimming pool across the road, lose all your car parking spaces, because people living in those flats will be parking on the swimming pool car park. That's what will happen. Not enough car parking. Second and thirdly, if you go back to the actual pictures of the site from Pullman Road, the photographs, please. That's it. If you imagine, councillors, the whole of that area and all those trees and that building and the car park and whatever that thing is in the right-hand corner, all of that is going to disappear completely. That skyline will disappear completely with a very large, over-domineering block of flats, completely closing down that corner. And it will be like going down a cavern, in my opinion. Have we a case here for an over-domineering building in the street scene that it will close that situation down? I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you. So there's a number of questions.
Thank you. Mr. Redford.
Thank you, Chair. Right. I have pulled up the approved plans for the adjacent building, which was the 6 flats. Now, Sam, can we bring the site location plan up, please? Right. If you, right, in terms of the building mark 28 and the proposal, if you look at the larger green rectangle to the rear of the proposed building, the section of number 28 that grass area sits beside, that is the section of number 28 that has primary room windows in it. The front section of 28, the flank wall, the front section, looking at the plans, the windows in that flank wall section that will abut the flank wall section of the proposal are bathrooms. Now, there is approximately 1 metre to 1.5 metres between those 2 sections of wall to answer that question, Councillor Lloydell. Now, with regards to your comments in respect of the domineering, overbearing...
Mr. Redford, could we just go back a little bit? The actual question Councillor Lloydell asked was the distance between the primary windows that you spoke about previously and the new building across that grass space.
Right, sorry.
What is the distance there?
Bear with me and I won't measure that up now.
Chair, whilst Mr. Redford is taking that measurement, because Councillor Bolter has no facility to virtually raise his hand, he has indicated, so if you could take note of that.
I will do, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The distance between those windows is 8.4 metres, Chair.
Thank you.
And on that, the principal room windows from the existing block facing towards the across that green, the openings on there are looking at the plans. At first floor level, the openings on first floor level overlooking that green also the hallway. There is at ground floor level 2 windows. A total of 4 windows. 2 of those windows serve bathrooms. The other 2 windows, one of them is parallel with the longer stretch of parking spaces, and that serves a kitchen. And there is a window serving the living area of a flat at ground floor level that faces pretty much slap bang onto that green. So, but even then, that is positioned so that the 8.4 meters, it's not on the plan, it's a straight distance, but the position of the windows is such that it's the interlocking over relationship with the windows, it's at an angle.
Okay, thank you.
So it's probably about 9 meters at its closest point.
Okay, thank you. You were going to talk about the over-domineering aspect that Councillor Lloyd all had concerns about?
In terms of that, picking up on the various points that have been raised with regards to the location, the height, the overbearing, the domineering and parking provision, on their own, if you were to look at each one on their own, I don't think they would be sufficient. Cumulatively, though, members may be of the opinion that on their own, no, not sufficient, but collectively, there is a significant impact that they may feel could justify a refusal on character and appearance in the street scene based on those elements together. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. I've been sitting here this evening. Once again, I'm amazed at the stuff we get put before us as a planning committee. And I'm mindful of refusing on one ground alone, and it's the paragraph 1 that the plans read before, entitled to put a minimum size on new builds. It was in there. I haven't got it in front of me. It was read to me and it was quite clear. And certainly we as authority, when we discussed it, we're not just talking about conversions, we were talking about the minimum sizes of flats, full stop. If there happen to be conversions, that's one thing. And Mr. Redford may like to read that bit again, but to me, it was quite clear. I cannot understand the reluctance of the planning department to push that one. So if I would like to propose a refusal on the grounds that the properties do not they conflict with the national guidelines for the size of the properties. There are other things that I'm sure other members want to add with regards to the windows and that, but to me, I don't want to be party to building flats in this borough to the size of telephone boxes. And I thought we had cleared that one up quite clearly. So I don't know whether anyone is keen enough to second me, but I'd like to move refusal on the grounds that I've just mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, may I just interrupt?
Yes, you can, yes.
Before there's a move to second that proposal by Councillor Corcoran, may I suggest that what we actually do is defer the matter to the next meeting. That will give us the opportunity, in the meantime, to confirm whether or not those size standards actually apply to this. Because if there is a refusal and those are included, and it then subsequently transpires that they're not relevant, that weakens the case that's put forward as any public inquiry. So I would suggest a deferral to the next meeting in order to enable consultations to be made, clarification be sought, if necessary, the appropriate calculations to be done. And then when we have that information, you will be better informed to consider the matter.
Yeah,
Have we
I'd be happy with that, provided I can be assured. I think I read in the papers that by the 31st of, it's got to be approved by the 31st of August. I don't want to defer it and then be done for non-determination.
That's what I was going to ask Councillor Kaufman.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gill,
The
can you
position on that,
confirm that it can't go to non-determination?
Yeah, the position on that would be that even if it's not decided and it was to go to non-determination and they were to appeal, if you're only adjourning this for 4 weeks, you will have a decision in 4 weeks' time. So the likely, there is always the possibility that at the next meeting, you may decide actually to approve it on the basis that those standards don't apply. I'm not saying you will, but at the next meeting there will be a decision, and they can either wait and accept and hope that you're going to approve, or they wait and see what your decision is and it's a refusal and it will go to appeal in any event.
Well, I move that then, Chair.
You want to change your
Yes, I would like to
proposal
propose
to defer?
to defer until the next meeting, bearing the advice that the monitoring officer has just given us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly on this, could we go to, I think it was slide 7, and it's the entrance into where the car parking is. My question on that, is that 7? No, it's the further down. So you've got the entrance coming in there. Now I'm going to ask, is that going to be gated? And the reason being is, if it's not going to be gated, you will get young people congregate under there, which will then become a bit of a nuisance to people because there will be noise and just generally young people gathering there because it provides a shelter. I've seen it in other areas and they've then gated that particular area to stop that sort of thing happening, and it has eradicated the issues that could arise from there. So I'd like to see that that is going to be a gated entrance for the residents that would be living there, if it's permitted at a future date, after deferral possibly. So is it possible to add something like that to it?
Mr. Redford?
Yes, I brought one of the plans up closer on my screen. The proposed ground floor plan actually shows a gate in there. It is, however, in line with the rear edge of the main length of the building on Pullman Road rather than at the front. That will be to comply with Highway Authority requirements because they don't like gates normally within 5 meters of the rear edge of the footpath, so that any vehicles that pull on can actually get clear of the footpath so as to not impede pedestrians. But there is a gate shown on that ground floor plan.
Okay.
Chair, can I just come back on that?
Yes.
Can we look at moving the gates? I understand what Mr. Redford's just said there with regards to the traffic and everything else. But if they put the right gates in there and the right people have the right access and the gates turn inwards, that wouldn't cause the issue for it. Putting them at the back of there, that's not going to solve the problem, and you will end up with the possibility of antisocial behaviour because young people will congregate on there. It's happened at other areas around the borough where they have that type of entrance where it's built over and provides a shelter. So we need to look at something there. Otherwise, we are inviting a possible problem at a future date.
Okay. Through you, Chair, if I may, just to confirm, so that should the deferral go through, so that I can ask the question of Highway straight away. Am I right in thinking, Councillor Morris, that you would like the gate at the front of that access nearest the road? Am I correct in that assumption?
I believe you are.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Much of what I was going to say has already been said, but in my opinion, it's an overdevelopment of the site. It's a very large footprint, dominant on the street scene. I'm a bit concerned about the D1 unit because we've talked about the parking for the flats, which I think there are 11 parking spaces there for all the flats. What about the parking for the D1 unit? Where's that going to be? That's not been mentioned at all. We've only got 12 parking spaces. We've got the existing flats, the new flats, the D1 use. Doesn't seem to be enough parking spaces there to me for that sort of thing. If you look at our policy 15 in a local plan, we talk about loss of amenity to residents. That's another thing. And have we got the landscaping scheme yet that's supposed to be put forward before planning application is permitted? I haven't seen that in the paperwork unless I've missed it. So that's something else that needs to be done before it's granted. So if we're going to defer it, I'm happy with that, but I think some of the questions need to be answered before we have the next meeting so that we can make a clear decision on what we're doing. As it stands at the minute, I'm of a mind that it is rather overdevelopment of the site, trying to get too much on there on a prominent corner. So let's defer it. Let's get the facts about the size of the flats. I think that's very important. And also we need the landscaping scheme as well. And who's going to maintain the landscaping scheme when it's put in place?
Okay. We'll make sure that comes forward, Councillor Bolter. Okay. Councillor Lloydall, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Kaufman's proposal for a deferment on to look at this terrible situation we've got ourselves into over the minimum size of flats and whether it's appropriate for new build or just redevelopments. But I also, at the moment, if you go back to diagram 7, page 7, which Councillor Morris asked us to look at, you look at the top picture, which is what is there existing, and then you look at what is being proposed. In my opinion, that is a complete over domineering of the street scene. That building on the right hand end completely domineers the semi-detached house next door. It's even higher than the top of the chimney stack, and it will close down entirely that corner. So I am of the opinion at the moment that it is over domineering in the street scene. I'm also of the opinion that it is over development of the site and an over concentration of numbers of flats on that site itself. So I really do have concerns about this, but at the moment I would let it go for a deferral to find out about the minimum size of these flats. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Broadley.
Thank you, Chair. Totally agree with deferring, but it wouldn't just be the deferring for the national standards, although you know that's the main one that we're going to go for. But I have to agree that it is certainly overdevelopment, that for 18 flats to have 11 car parking spaces and a unit there is not enough. I take on board Councillor Morris's thing for the gates to be at the front. My concern there was if they were at the front is that road, then you have 2 lanes coming out of Pullman Road and 1 going in, and cars queue up there now, and that if cars are waiting there to get in through the gates, whether it's automatic gate or whatever, it could cause a problem. So that again I would look at, but I am very happy with the deferment, and then obviously all the other things that we don't like about this we can be discussed at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can you confirm, Mr. Ball, that we have no more hands up?
Yeah, no more hands, Chair.
Okay, then we will move to the vote. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Kaufman to defer the application on the grounds stated, seconded by Councillor Lloydall. Could we now go to the vote, Mr. Ball?
Yep. Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4,
Yeah. Councillor Broadley.
4,
Councillor Hack.
4,
Councillor Joshi.
4,
Councillor Kaufman.
4,
Councillor Core.
4,
Councillor Kozlowski.
4,
Councillor Lloydell.
4,
Councillor Morris.
4.
Councillor Ridley.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That application is deferred. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, planning appeals summary update. Mr. Redford.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just bringing the bits up on my screen. So yeah, this as members are aware, in addition to the monthly KPIs, every year we provide you with an update as to the appeals decisions for the preceding financial year period. The reports for noting, and as members will see, are set out. We are required, in order to avoid being a standards authority on appeals, we are required to win at least 70% of the appeals that we receive. As members will see from the report, paragraph 3.1 sets out that in the financial year 1920, we had a total of 14 appeals submitted. Of those appeals, 12 were dismissed and 2 were allowed, with 1 application for costs awarded against the council. On the basis of the dismissals allows, you can see as per paragraph 4.1, that represents an 86% dismissal and 14% allowed, and as such we are in the right place in terms of successfully defending the appeals that we get. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, take into account that report is for noting only. Councillor Kaufman.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to make the point of the nonsense that there's, with such small figures, 14, you can lose another opinion, you can be in trouble on this thing. I'm a bit concerned that there's sometimes stifles debate in a way that we're more concerned about, if we're not careful, we could be more concerned about losing money on the cost of appeals than doing what we think is right in planning applications. I accept where we are. I noticed that there are no members, there's nothing down here that the members have gone against officers' advice and have lost. But it really is a nonsense thing that the government have put in. But thank you for the information.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Again, that report is for noting. Mr. Ball, can you confirm there are no more hands up? I can't see any.
Yeah, no hands, Chair.
Okay, we will move on then. Agenda item 7, planning enforcement activity report. Mr. Redford.
Thank you, Chair. Draw your attention to the report summary towards the top of page 35. For the 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020, in terms of cases, we registered 178 new appeals at new enforcement cases. We closed 144. And as of 31st of March, there were 144 live ongoing enforcement cases on hand. Jumping down to paragraph 2.3 towards the bottom of page 36. Over the year, we issued a total of 5 formal notices comprising a mixture of enforcement notices and section 215 notices. Of those notices, none were appealed or challenged in the courts. as Section 215 notices can only be challenged through the court, but nothing on that front. The oldest case on hand, as per 2.4, is 6 years old. It's one of those, I draw your attention to that because it's one of those whereby it relates to a balcony that on the rear of a dwelling, where a notice was served and on which the homeowners have complied with the notice, which still stays in place, but after a while, after the works have been done to remove it, it comes back again. And then he takes it away again when we chase him, when we get a report that it's gone back up again. That's why it's still there as 6 years old, because the homeowner keeps putting the balcony back, having removed it. But yeah, that's the figures. So yes, we are as a team making inroads to try and get that number down. The enforcement officer's back on a phased return now. We've got someone else helping him now, picking enforcement ones up as well, to try and make meaningful inroads to that on-hand number. So yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Again, that report is for noting. I cannot see any hands up. Can you confirm that, Mr. Ball?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, so again, that item is for noting only. And that concludes the business of the day. So thank you, everybody.